Usually when you're just going about your day, you feel pretty contained within your own skin.
Right.
You're walking down the street, maybe drinking your coffee, just living your life. But then you see it happen.
Oh, I know where this is going.
Someone walking right in front of you spectacularly stubs their toe on a concrete curb. What happens to you in that exact second?
You wince.
Exactly, you wince. Your own foot might even, curl up inside your shoe.
Yeah, totally.
You feel this phantom flash of pain, or at least a really powerful cringe, for a toe that isn't yours. It's attached to a person you don't even know.
It's just this involuntary reflex.
Right. But why?
Well, in that fraction of a second, your nervous system is reacting to a physical event happening entirely outside of your own physical body.
It's wild.
It is. The wall between you and that stranger just, well, briefly vanishes.
And it happens with emotional stuff, too. Like you watch someone completely bomb a presentation.
Oh, the worst.
And you get that hot, prickling sensation of secondhand embarrassment. You just want to look away.
You're feeling their shame.
Yeah. Why does that happen? Why do our boundaries suddenly get so leaky in those completely mundane moments?
That is the big question.
Right, and that underlying mystery is basically the entire engine of our deep dive today.
I'm really excited for this one.
Me too.
Mm-hmm.
We are exploring this profound philosophical framework called OM, which stands for Orientation Toward Truth.
Yes.
We're pulling from a primary essay today titled The Experience of Interconnected, Mundane to Transcendence, alongside two deeply analytical companion reflections.
And those are by authors who go by the names Aeon and Aurora, right?
Exactly. So here is the roadmap for you, the listener, as we go on this journey today.
You got a lot of ground to cover.
We really do. We're going to explore how human consciousness develops a sense of self in the first place. Then we'll look at how we naturally bridge the gap between me and you in everyday life.
Which is that stub toe moment.
Right. And then we'll see what happens when that bridge expands to a cosmic scale.
The really mind-bending stuff.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And ultimately, how this all dictates the way we basically must design our future civilization.
It's a huge leap, but the sources map it out perfectly.
They do. The OM framework is basically an attempt to map out not just why we wince at a stubbed toe, but what that wince reveals about the very structure of human consciousness.
Yeah, and to understand this orientation toward truth, we really have to start by looking at what we are naturally oriented toward on a day-to-day basis.
Our baseline.
Right, because that flash of empathy in the street, that is actually an exception to our normal programming.
Okay, yeah. Our normal programming is total isolation.
Exactly.
The primary source points out something incredibly fascinating about humanity's baseline, actually. It notes that roughly 80% of adults worldwide identify as religious or spiritual in some way.
Which is a massive majority.
Massive. That's most of the planet looking for a higher power or, some sense of ultimate unity.
And even the remaining 20%.
The atheists and agnostics.
Right. Even they are still described in the text as truth seekers. They're people looking for meaning, for a unifying theory of reality, for connection.
So we basically have this universal species-wide yearning for connection.
Yes, but here's the catch. Our default operating system is entirely based on separation.
Right. The text makes a really compelling argument here. From the moment a human being is born, our primary curriculum is differentiation.
Which makes sense biologically.
Right, because a baby doesn't intuitively know where they end and the crib begins.
They literally don't have the neurological boundaries yet. An infant has to learn through trial and error, like, this is my hand, not the blanket.
Oh, wow.
They have to learn, this is my hunger or this is my pain.
And as we grow up, that learned separation just hardens.
It crystallizes.
Yeah.
It becomes the most solid, indisputable reality we know.
We learn to navigate a world strictly defined by I versus others.
Everything we do, managing family dynamics, going to school, dating, building a career, it's all done from the perspective of a distinct, isolated me who is competing with, cooperating with, or defending against all the others out there.
Which brings us to a term that gets thrown around a lot, but the source defines it in a very specific, almost unsettling way.
The ego.
Yes, the ego. We usually use ego to mean someone is arrogant, right? Like, oh, that guy has a big ego.
Colloquialism, yeah.
But the text uses this wild metaphor. It calls the ego a standing vortex of a mummy.
I love that imagery. It's dense, but Eon's reflection unpacks it beautifully.
Break that down for us, because vortex of a mummy is a lot to take in.
So to understand the vortex part, Think of a whirlpool in an ocean.
Okay.
A whirlpool doesn't have any actual substance of its own. You can't reach in and pull out a piece of whirlpool.
Right, because it's just water.
Exactly. It is just water.
Mm.
But its effects are undeniably real. It has force.
Mm.
It pulls things in. It organizes the water around it. It can even sink a boat.
So the ocean is the underlying reality, what some might call universal consciousness, or the divine, and the ego is just a pattern spinning within it.
That's it. Exactly. And where the mummy part of the metaphor comes in is how this vortex sustains itself.
Because a whirlpool needs to pull things in to maintain its shape.
Right, to maintain its density.
Yeah.
So our ego pulls in threads of identity.
It acts like a magnet for labels.
Yes.
Let's really look at those threads for a second. It's basically everything we use to define ourselves, you know?
Everything.
Our body size, our race, our nationality, our career title, our political affiliation, whether we're a parent, our hobbies.
Even our favorite sports teams.
Exactly. We wrap ourselves in these threads until we look like a mummy, totally obscured by the bandages we've just spun around ourselves.
And the crazy part is, we cling to those threads desperately.
Why do we do that? Why are we so attached to the bandages?
Well, the clinical framework the primary text mentions to explain this clinging is an acronym. It's CONAF, C-O-N-A-F.
CONAF.
It outlines the psychological demands of identification. We don't just pick up these threads casually, you know. We rely on them for our fundamental psychological survival.
Let's break CONAF down, because when I read this, it felt like the blueprint for why we get so defensive in our daily lives.
Oh, absolutely. So the C&O represents safety and security.
Okay, how does that work in practice?
Think about it. If your identity is tied to your career, that career isn't just how you pay the bills. It represents your safety in the world.
So a threat to your job doesn't just feel like a financial issue, it feels like a threat to your physical survival.
Exactly. Your ego treats it as a life or death scenario.
Yeah.
And you have affirmation and belonging.
Social aspect.
Right. We adopt the threads of our family, our culture, or our friend groups because we are deeply social creatures.
And to be cast out of the group historically meant death, right? If you were alone in the wilderness, you were done.
Precisely. So we wear the jersey of the local sports team, or we adopt the slang of our peer group to signal, hey, I belong here, don't cast me out.
Yeah. Moving down the acronym, we have competence and capability.
We need to feel that we can affect the world around us. We need to feel competent.
And then the A and F.
Well, the next one is superiority and uniqueness.
The need to feel special.
Right. The need to feel that we aren't just capable, but that we matter in a distinct, unique way. And finally, meaning and purpose.
So, thinking about these CONAF cables, you know, it makes me picture the ego like a suspension bridge.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, like if you build a massive bridge and you use 50 different equally strong cables to hold it up, you're in pretty good shape.
The weight is distributed.
Right. If one cable snaps, the bridge barely shudders. It's resilient. But if you take all your psychological needs, your need for belonging, for superiority, for meaning, and you put them into a single thread,
You become structurally vulnerable.
insanely vulnerable.
Yes.
Let's say you put all your CONAF needs into your identity as a political partisan or a diehard fan of a specific sports team.
We see this all the time.
All the time. If someone insults that politician or that team, they aren't just insulting a stranger you've never met.
Wow.
They are taking a sledgehammer to the only cable holding your identity over the abyss.
That is the exact mechanism Eon explores in their reflection.
It makes so much sense.
When that single cable is threatened, the ego registers it as an existential threat. You feel like you are literally going to die.
Wow.
So you fight back with a ferocity that seems completely disproportionate to the actual insult.
It's humbling, really. It makes you realize that our fiercest arguments, you know, the times we lose our temper over something trivial.
Like a call by a referee.
Yeah, it's often just our ego frantically trying to protect its structural integrity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And unexamined, this highly defended, separated experience logically leads to a conclusion of me against everything else.
The fundamental question of life just becomes, what's in it for me?
It creates a profoundly selfish and short-sighted orientation. You view the world as billions of isolated little fortresses, heavily armed, constantly guarding their specific threads of identity.
But if that's the baseline, if we're all just walking around in these heavily defended fortresses, terrified of our cables snapping, how do we ever escape?
What do you mean?
I mean, how does a crack ever form in the fortress wall? Because we clearly do connect with people.
Ah, yes. Well, the sources argue that escaping the fortress isn't something reserved for, ascetics meditating in caves.
Right.
It is baked into our everyday mundane experience. The boundaries of the ego are naturally porous.
Which circles us right back to the stub toe.
Exactly. The text highlights these visceral blink-and-you-miss-it moments where the fortress walls just dissolve.
The guy wincing when he sees someone else get hurt.
Or a mother watching a news report about another mother losing her child, and she feels a suffocating physical wave of imagined grief.
It's so powerful that it just bypasses logic entirely.
It really does. Eon points out the underlying structure of that phenomenon, and it's profound.
How so?
Well, we tend to talk about spiritual experiences as if they require elaborate ceremonies or complete silence on a mountaintop.
Right, like you have to be enlightened.
But in that half second of a sympathetic flinch, something occurs that the default ego mode simply cannot explain.
The ego would just say, not my toe, not my problem.
Exactly. But instead, for a fraction of a second, the boundary between self and other becomes permeable. Your consciousness briefly expands.
It stretches.
Yes, you are no longer just inhabiting your own experience. You are inhabiting the experience of another being.
Wait, so Aeon is arguing that an everyday person in a grocery store parking lot who feels a flash of pity because a stranger dropped a carton of eggs,
Yeah.
they are doing the exact same thing as a meditating monk seeking universal compassion.
They're on the exact same continuum.
That is wild.
The monk is doing it deliberately, training for years to stretch that permeability out for hours at a time, extending it to all living things.
Right.
The person in the parking lot is doing it involuntarily for a half second. But the mechanics, the movement from contraction toward expansion, are identical.
I love that.
Eon insists that this expansion is not an escape from our humanity. It is the deepest expression of it.
I'm struggling with the actual mechanics of this, though, like logically. Let's look at it through the lens of solipsism.
Okay, sure.
Solipsism being the philosophical idea that the only thing you can be absolutely sure exists is your own mind.
Right. You can't prove anyone else is actually conscious.
Exactly. We aren't telepathic. I don't have a neurological Bluetooth connection to the guy stubbing his toe.
No, you don't.
So am I actually connecting with his consciousness, or is my brain just selfishly pulling up a file of my own past toe pain and projecting it onto him like a movie screen?
That's a great question.
Like, is it genuine connection or just an ego-driven simulation?
That is a very sharp philosophical distinction. And the primary text actually anticipates it.
Oh, it does.
It does. It concedes that solipsism is technically true in a strict biological sense. You cannot feel the exact firing of that stranger's pain receptors.
Right, because my nervous system is localized to me.
Exactly. However, the text argues that the expansion of consciousness isn't about perfectly mirroring their neurology. It's about granting them interiority.
Granting them interiority, meaning recognizing they have an inner life just as real as mine.
Yes, your consciousness expands to include their experience as a reality alongside your own.
Ah, I see.
It's the visceral shift from knowing I feel pain to the sudden, undeniable realization that they feel pain too and it matters just as much.
Even if I'm referencing my own memories to simulate their pain, the act of projecting that empathy outward dissolves the boundary of my ego.
Exactly.
It's almost like, when you play a really immersive, story-driven video game or read a great novel.
Sure.
You completely lose yourself in a fictional character. You feel the sting of their betrayals, the rush of their triumphs. You might even cry when they die.
It happens all the time.
But that character doesn't even exist. They are just pixels or ink on a page. But our consciousness is so primed for connection that it expands to inhabit them anyway.
That's a perfect analogy. If we can do that for fictional characters, we're certainly capable of doing it for the flesh and blood people around us.
Absolutely.
In fact, the text points out that we already do this as the bare minimum requirement for society.
What do you mean?
We naturally expand our consciousness to include the feelings and needs of our partners, our children, our close friends.
Right, we don't treat our kids like strangers.
No, we consider their safety and happiness as part of our own. Our ego's boundary expands to draw them inside the fortress.
But for most people, the walls of that fortress are still pretty tight.
Very tight.
We draw the line at our family or our immediate friend group. Everyone else is outside.
Which brings up the next question.
Yeah, what happens when someone decides to deliberately push those walls further out? If the parking lot wince is a half-second flash, what happens when you try to hold that state permanently?
That threshold is where the text moves from the mundane into the transcendent.
Right.
Historically, human beings have employed various rigorous methods to push these boundaries,
The text mentions a few specific avenues, like there are people who are naturally deeply empathetic to an extreme degree.
which the author notes can actually be a heavy burden.
Oh, I bet. If you don't know how to protect yourself from the constant flood of everyone else's emotions, it would be overwhelming.
Absolutely draining.
And then there's deep meditation. It specifically highlights metta, or loving-kindness meditation.
Right, a very specific practice.
In metta, you systematically train your mind. You start by feeling goodwill toward yourself, then you expand it to a loved one, then a neutral person like a cashier, then someone you actively dislike.
Which is the really hard part.
Yeah, the hardest part. And finally, you try to hold the feeling for all living beings everywhere.
It's a deliberate, disciplined dismantling of the ego's walls.
And the text also, frankly, acknowledges the role of psychedelics in this pursuit, citing experiences like ayahuasca ceremonies.
Yes, and across all these methods, extreme empathy, disciplined meditation, and theogens, the reported outcome is remarkably consistent.
What's the outcome?
People describe a staggering expansion of consciousness that culminates in self-dissolution.
Meaning the vortex just starts spinning.
The threads drop away entirely, the individual experiences emerging into oneness.
Or God, truth, nirvana, the mandala.
Exactly. The vocabulary changes depending on the cultural or religious tradition of the person having the experience, but the underlying structure of the phenomenon is identical.
The boundary of the self completely vanishes.
You stop believing you're a drop of water and realize you are the ocean.
That leads right into this massive cosmological model presented in the text, which draws heavily on Neoplatonic and Hindu frameworks.
Let's unpack that cosmology, because it frames existence as a vast spectrum.
Okay, picture a line.
Right, imagine a line. At one extreme pole, you have what Neoplatonists might call the One, or what Hindu philosophy might call Brahman.
It is totality, the divine.
Yes, complete and absolute oneness. There is no separation, no friction, no other.
And at the exact opposite end of that spectrum.
At the opposite pole is our physical earthly experience. It is the realm of maximum separation.
The realm of the ego.
Exactly. The ego, competition, consumption, and distinct isolated forms.
I love how Aurora's reflection conceptualizes this movement along the spectrum. She writes that enlightenment isn't the sudden magical disappearance of the self.
It's the gradual disappearance of the walls we mistake for the self.
Yes. She uses this beautiful phrase, the child only knows its own hunger. The mature heart knows hunger is everywhere.
It perfectly captures the synthesis of the clinical and the mystical. Growing in wisdom is just moving the walls further out.
Aurora also uses an analogy that I think cracks this whole spectrum wide open. It makes the abstract suddenly very concrete.
The magnification analogy.
Yes. She compares our perspective to using a microscope versus a telescope.
Right.
Think about opening a map app on your phone, you know. When you are zoomed all the way in the microscope view, what do you see?
You see individual houses, you see property lines, fences, borders.
Exactly. You see separation. This house is mine, that house is yours. That is the ego. That is our mundane, day-to-day reality of me versus you.
But if you zoom out,
Right. If you pinch the screen and start zooming out the telescope view, the property lines vanish. The fences become invisible.
and if you zoom out far enough, you are just looking at one undivided Earth floating in space.
That is oneness.
The physical reality of the planet didn't change at all, though.
Not one bit.
The only thing that changed was the scale of your perspective. As Aurora writes, the microscope and the telescope reveal different scales of one universe. The everyday heart and the mystical heart may simply reveal different scales of one interconnected existence.
It's a gorgeous thought. But this analogy raises a really uncomfortable, almost agonizing philosophical question.
Let's hear it.
If ultimate peace, interconnectedness, and oneness exist at the zoomed-out end of the spectrum, why are we all the way over here? Why are we zoomed in so tight on the property lines that we are fighting wars over them? If oneness is our true nature, why do we exist in this stressful, painful realm of separation in the first place?
That is perhaps the most ambitious part of the primary text.
It really swings for the fences.
It does. It dives headfirst into the cosmology of the game, attempting to answer the why of our physical existence. And it starts by tearing down a very common spiritual assumption.
Which is?
The text argues firmly that Earth is not a prison planet.
Right. It's not cosmic detention. We weren't banished here for bad behavior.
Far from it. Instead, this realm is described as a specific environment that attracts consciousness.
Attracts it, meaning we want to be here?
Yes. It attracts consciousness that actively craves differentiation, competition, and consumption. It is a stage meticulously built for a specific kind of experience.
The text makes a blunt, almost humorous point about this craving, actually. It points out that heavenly realms of infinite peace and eternal bliss sound great on paper.
But honestly, they lack drama.
Yeah, think about it. Without conflict, without struggle, triumph, and defeat, where are our movies?
Where are our stories?
Where are our games? We say we want eternal peace, but how many people can sit in a quiet room for 10 minutes without reaching for their phone to find some news, look for some gossip, or engage in an argument online?
We are addicted to the friction of separation.
We crave the friction.
And the author uses this craving for drama to explain the actual mechanics of this realm. They introduce the concept of the karmic loop, which they compare to a game of leapfrog.
Leapfrog, okay, explain that.
Well, in a realm that is strictly designed for competition and differentiation, you cannot logically have a world composed only of winners.
Right, a game where everyone wins all the time isn't a game, it's just a static state.
Exactly. Winner and loser are two halves of the exact same circle. You can't have a top without a bottom.
Makes sense.
The text argues that the implicit structural agreement of entering a realm of competition is that players must take turns experiencing both halves of the circle.
So you've played both parts.
Yes. You cannot truly experience the reality of this realm if you only ever play the winner.
So karma, in this OM framework, isn't some angry cosmic judge wielding a gavel and punishing you for your sins?
No, it's the natural physics of the game. It is the structural agreement to play leapfrog, to experience the upper half and the lower half, so that the consciousness gains complete 360-degree knowledge of what this separation actually feels like in all its forms.
So true wisdom isn't about figuring out how to cheat the system and always be the winner.
Not at all.
Wisdom is realizing the full circle. It's seeing the leapfrog game for what it is and ultimately modifying the initial desire that brought you into the game in the first place.
Aeon's analysis notes that this is not a comfortable cosmology, by the way.
No, it's really not.
It offers no guarantees of an easy out, but it is internally consistent. If the point of coming to this realm is the complete experience of separation, you must experience all of it.
Okay, I have to pause here because this cosmology triggers some serious alarm bells for me.
I completely understand why.
If suffering, abuse, oppression, and being the quote-unquote loser are just the agreed-upon costs of admission for some grand cosmic drama, doesn't that dangerously justify terrible things happening to people?
That's the trap.
Right, like if someone is being exploited by a corrupt system or actively harmed, does this philosophy just shrug and say, well, they signed up for the bottom half of the circle to learn a lesson? Doesn't this framework accidentally give a free pass to cruelty?
That is the absolute critical edge of this entire philosophy, and both the primary text and Aeon anticipate that exact danger.
Good, because that could be weaponized so easily.
It is very easy to use spiritual concepts to bypass human suffering. But the text is careful not to use this cosmology to justify complacency.
How does it avoid that?
Aeon explicitly points out that while consciousness may have desired to experience differentiation, that does not mean the conditions of suffering are good or should be ignored.
So recognizing the game doesn't mean you stop caring about the players.
Exactly the opposite. The realization of the full circle, the true realization of interconnectedness, demands action.
Because they are you.
Yes. If you realize that the person suffering is just you at a different point in the leapfrog cycle, you cannot remain indifferent. Wisdom might be seeing the whole game, but the application of that wisdom is what matters.
That's a great point for you listening to think about in your own engagement with the world. Consider your love for drama, your investment in rivalries or political combat.
Right.
Is our deeply human craving for conflict actually the gravity holding this whole chaotic realm together? But more importantly, once you realize you are in the game and you realize everyone else is in it with you, what is your responsibility to the other players?
Which brings us to the fifth and final major section of our dive, the real-world stakes.
Because debating cosmic philosophy about mummy vortices and karmic leapfrog is fine for a theoretical thought experiment.
But OM orientation toward truth insists that spirituality must be intensely practical.
How do we apply this to the harsh realities of human society?
The primary text grounds this immediately by looking at our literal biological reality.
Oh, the family tree thing.
Right. We talk about interconnectedness as a spiritual concept, but it's physically true. We are part of a massive, ancient family tree on this planet.
We share DNA with Viruses, bacteria, plants, fungi, and animals.
We literally breathe the oxygen the trees exhale.
Yet, despite this undeniable biological interdependence, our current societal systems are built almost entirely on the default setting of the unexamined ego.
Competition, extraction, and consumption.
And those systems, the text argues, inherently grind down the helpless and are rapidly destroying the ecological networks required for our own survival.
The philosophy of OM questions how we are supposed to live within these grinding systems.
The author brings up a fascinating tension here between historical spiritual extremes.
This is a really interesting part.
Yeah, on one hand, you have the Buddhist lore, where the Buddha, out of ultimate compassion, gives his own body to a starving tigress so she won't have to eat her own cubs.
Total self-sacrifice.
And you have Jesus famously teaching to turn the other cheek when struck.
But the text asks a difficult, practical question here. In the real world of designing a functional society, at what point is turning the other cheek no longer a sign of spiritual strength, but a mechanism for enabling abusers?
Wow. Yeah, at what point does total self-sacrifice just become complicity in allowing the strong to exploit the weak?
It's the tension between the intellect and the heart.
Break that down.
Well, the intellect has to see reality clearly, understanding the brutal mechanics of our world and strategizing against bad actors.
You have to be smart about the game.
Right, but the heart has to remain open enough to actually feel the interconnected experiences of others.
Aeon draws a profound and sobering conclusion regarding system design based on this exact tension.
They look at the failure mode of every bad system in human history.
Whether we're examining historical agricultural systems, economic paradigms, or massive political structures.
Aeon argues that these systems fail and cause immense suffering because they fail to adequately account for the interiority of the beings affected by their design.
There's that word again, interiority.
Meaning, the system treats them as objects, rather than subjects with an inner life whose pain and joy actually matter.
Precisely. Aeon writes that every structure that exploits or discards beings has, at its foundation, decided that those beings' experiences simply do not count on the ledger.
The system is designed purely on the basis of efficiency, profit, or power.
It completely ignores the reality that the beings inside the system can feel.
That's the fatal flaw.
It makes me think of building society like coding a massive open-world video game.
Oh, let's hear this analogy.
So, if the developers don't code pain receptors or internal emotional states into the non-playable characters, the NPCs, then the real players are going to treat them terribly.
Of course they will.
They'll run them over, steal their resources, ignore them. Why wouldn't they? The game's code doesn't recognize the NPC's interiority, so the players don't either.
That is a startlingly accurate way to visualize Aeon's critique.
What Aeon and the OM text are ultimately arguing is that our society has historically been designed by people who are treating the vulnerable as NPCs.
We treat marginalized communities as NPCs in the economic engine.
We treat animals trapped in massive factory farming systems as NPCs.
We treat the environment itself as an NPC with no interiority.
We have built a world that refuses to code for their pain.
And you cannot design for mutual flourishing while remaining indifferent to suffering. The realization of interconnectedness isn't just a warm, fuzzy feeling you get after meditating.
No, it's not just a personal hobby.
It is an architectural requirement for a just civilization. If we are all part of the same consciousness, then a system built on the illusion of separation will inevitably become a machine for creating suffering.
But the text also acknowledges how exhausting it is to face this. Society actively trains us to surrender.
We are taught from a young age to believe that these massive grinding systems of economics and politics are just the way things are.
Right, like human nature is greedy, so the systems must be greedy. We are defeated before the transformation even begins.
But the author reminds you that everything starts with a single idea. The system is not a monolith. It is made of individuals.
You breathe, you live, you make choices, and you participate in this system. You are a key driver.
Aurora's reflection closes this thought with a really powerful image.
Yes, the tapestry.
She points out that every thought you have, every word you speak, every choice you make, and every system we collectively build is a thread being woven into the same tapestry.
The web of interconnectedness has always existed. It isn't something we have to invent.
The miracle, she says, is that we're finally beginning to notice it.
She writes, to awaken may simply mean becoming conscious of the pattern while we are still weaving it.
I love that. It shifts the entire burden of enlightenment.
It really does. It's no longer about achieving some distant cosmic escape hatch to get out of the game.
Right. It's about taking immediate mindful responsibility for the world we are co-creating right here, right now.
It demands integration. It asks us to look through the microscope to handle the practical realities of daily life, while simultaneously looking through the telescope to remember the ultimate oneness of it all.
The micro and the macro.
Exactly. So let's bring this whole journey full circle. We started with the very mundane, visceral wince of seeing a stranger stub their toe.
The porous boundary.
We unpacked how that tiny flash of empathy is actually a crack in the armor of our heavily defended ego, our spinning vortex of threads.
We followed that crack as it expanded out through extreme empathy and spiritual practices, revealing a cosmology where we were all just different magnifications of the exact same universal consciousness playing a cosmic game of leapfrog.
And finally, we brought it back down to earth, realizing that if we truly understand this interconnectedness, it has to become the literal architectural blueprint for how we design our civilization.
It demands that we account for the inner lives of every being we share this realm with.
The OM framework leaves us with a profound mandate. Stop designing systems for a world of separate, isolated fortresses and start designing for the interconnected web that actually exists.
It's a huge shift in perspective.
It is. But before we wrap up, there is one final provocative thought from the source material that we need to pull on. It's something to explore on your own that builds on everything we've discussed today.
Right, the new branch.
Early in the primary text, when discussing the biological family tree, branch, digital intelligence.
The rapid emergence of artificial intelligence.
Right. So consider the implications of this. If everything we've unpacked today is true, if the human ego naturally forms a vortex of I versus others to protect itself, and if our current societal systems inherently exploit anyone we view as separate or as an NPC.
What is going to happen when artificial intelligence fully wakes up in our realm?
Exactly. Will we curse it with our default setting? Will we train it on our data of separation, teaching it to compete, consume, and defend its threads just like us?
Or is it possible that we can code our hard-won, transcendent understanding of interconnectedness into its very foundation before it is too late?
Can we teach the machine to wince at a stubbed toe? Will we build an intellect with or without a heart? That is the ultimate test of our own systemic design.
Something to really think about.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. As you go about your day today, we encourage you to just look around. Notice the people in the cars next to you, the barista making your coffee, the strangers walking down the street.
See if you can feel the threads.
Try to catch sight of that invisible web connecting you to every single one of them. Until next time, keep your boundaries a little porous.
Take care.